Beginnings are tricky. Where do you even begin with Star Wars? If someone hasn't seen the films, where do they start? Do they start with the first movie made, which is really episode 4? Begin in the middle and just kind of loop their way around the saga? That's a pretty clumsy way. Or do they begin with episode 1, which is really the 4th movie made? It's a film which released 20 years after the first one, which is the 4th one. Nerds will argue over which way is better because, nerds are the lawyers of the internet. But I'm not really convinced that there's a clean answer here. Just like I'm not altogether sure there's a right way to begin Star Wars, or even a Star Wars documentary. So I guess I should just begin with my personal beginning. My introduction to the saga. And if we're going to do that, I'm going to need to take you all the way back to childhood. And it's weird, When I remember childhood, I think of 2 things. Movie nights and pillow forts. As a kid, I watched Star Wars hundreds of times. It didn't matter which episode. I loved them all. Star Wars was Star Wars. And I could feel the Force was with me, regardless of which film was on. But something changed. Older and now exposed to the internet, I learned that my view of Star Wars was wrong, that there weren't 6 films part of one large saga, but that there was a good trilogy and an ugly one. So I spent my post-adolescent years abandoning films I had loved as a child. But again, something changed. Confronted with new ideas and a new set of Star Wars films, I was forced to ask myself, what do I make of all this? What is the Star Wars saga? And what roles do the prequel films play in it? I had a crazy idea. I would go on an adventure. I traveled thousands of miles, interviewing everyone I could find. Filmmakers, theorists, psychologists, actors, everyone. All in search of answers. This is my journey, and it begins in the most familiar of places. The internet. There's a story on the internet. One passed on from forum boards and comment sections. A tale told in almost Dickensian fashion. A tale of 2 Georges. And it begins, he was the best of directors.
He's maybe one of the most imaginative people in the last 50 years.
He was the worst of directors.
If a Star Wars movie were like an asteroid meter, then the Phantom Menace would be the kind that killed the dinosaurs.
He was the idol for a generation.
Teenage boys loved this movie, and then the toys started coming.
He was the object for their scorn.
This was ours. We were children with Star Wars. How could he and all this shit?
He was the special effects wizard.
It set and raised the bar onto what everybody expected.
He was the tech junkie who ran out of magic.
Natalie Portman even said in this interview once that she doesn't like acting on green screen, so George Lucas is stupid.
He was the renegade kid.
The reason he wanted to be an independent filmmaker was because he didn't like working with corporations.
He was the rebel who became the evil empire.
He does sort of become the thing that he hates.
Like the gods and the mythologies he drew upon, George giveth and George taketh.
There is this very bad part of the internet that loves to operate on extremes. We don't have a middle ground anymore.
I think that the internet has become a soundboard for negative fanboys.
They write books, they make songs, they make films, they re-edit the films. Nobody hates Star Wars like a Star Wars fan.
When people can sit in a dark room and nobody knows who they are, they will lash out like nobody's business.
And the internet is such a rapid opinion without a lot of exploration kind of place. If you're not taking the time to really delve into why you hold that opinion, it becomes not dangerous, but a little bit unfair.
It's important to ask, have fans been fair to George Lucas? When looking at the source of fan criticism, many will cite Lucas's inconsistency.
If you just listen to his interviews and stuff over and over, I think that he kind of changes his mind a lot.
Star Wars has so many different things going on, and none of us were there. And there's so many different things, and Lucas has said so many different things over the years, and people say so many different things in interviews.
I think there's definitely been, instances where he's contradicted himself.
The poet Walt Whitman once mused, "Do I contradict myself? Very well. Then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." I began to realize in order to understand Lucas, I needed to determine what were his contradictions and what were his multitudes. This began with asking questions.
Who is the audience for these movies? There is such a misconception about who it should have been, who it was, who Lucas thought it was.
Yeah, the whole Star Wars is for kids thing, in my opinion, honestly, I think it was because of the negative backlash of like Jar Jar Binks and Jake Lloyd as Anakin Skywalker. He was like, oh, well, it's for kids. Well, what are you talking about?
Why are they saying Roger, Roger?
Roger, Roger.
Is this a tribute to Roger Ebert? No, I don't think so. They're going Roger, Roger because kids will find it funny. Not because what adult laughed at Roger, Roger?
I mean, look, it's my 40-year-old brain that's looking at it and going like, this is for kids, or this is kind of cheesy. But there's a lot of cheesy, cute stuff in the original trilogy as well.
The primary audience of Star Wars has always been young people. You can go back to, interviews before Star Wars even came out. After American Graffiti, he decided to go the Disney route and make a children's film.
Lucas, in his original vision for Star Wars, was I want to make a light fairy tale. I want to give kids something. He really intentionally wanted to make the original Star Wars as a fantasy for kids because kids didn't have heroes.
The opening shot of 1977's Star Wars, where we see a rebel ship outgunned by a massive Imperial Star Destroyer, is now famous. It brings out the child in all of us, regardless of age. But at the time, many adults were not as moved.
A lot of the critics just thought that it was kind of a silly kid's picture.
Yeah, it looked to them like Star Trek from TV.
Because at the end of the day, and I'm a fan of this myself, you're talking about a lot of stuff that is very silly.
Here's what's so funny. The things that we praise about the original trilogy today were totally criticized back in the day.
The acting, the dialogue, the fact that they thought they were just silly kids' movies, and there were annoying characters, there were empty, hollow special effects spectacles.
Yet the first Star Wars and its sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, are now viewed as the saga's best. Some fans even claim the films are more Star Wars than the others.
What I meant about Return of the Jedi is I know intellectually it's inferior to A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and I think the prequels were like that too.
Once I was like 13, 14 with my movie friends, it was always like, what, you like Return of the Jedi best? Like, that's so childish. Like, Empire Strikes Back, like when you get older, that's the one that you understand and know is the real Star Wars movie. Like, that's the one.
But again, the critical community had no problem dismissing The Empire Strikes Back. Original reviews of the film were even worse than its predecessor.
If you're exposed to some of these movies in the right way, you're always going to look at them as great cinematic works. If you're ever exposed to a great movie, sometimes though in the wrong way, it can really hamper your appreciation of it.
It's made me reevaluate the prequels. It's made me think about, had I seen the Star Wars prequels when I originally saw the first Star Wars, if I was 12 years old and saw the Star Wars prequels, I would have lost my mind. I would have gone nuts.
When I saw Darth Maul pull out a double-sided lightsaber, I was like in awe. I just was like, that's a thing? As a 7-year-old, you're like, that's so cool.
One of my best friends who went to all the Star Wars movies with me, his daughter is 8 years old, and he texts me, and she'll say, the best part's on, it's the Senate scene in Phantom Menace. Why? She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't care. She loves the way it looks. She loves Queen Amidala. She loves the way Queen Amidala looks and sounds and acts.
If this body is not capable of action, I suggest new leadership is needed.
A colleague of mine pointed out to me, he's like, did you ever notice that in every one of the movies,
the perspective shot of most scenes is done from the angle of a 7 or an 8-year-old. Think of Obi-Wan talking to Luke, or Padme talking to Anakin, or Han talking to Leia, and you're basically at, kind of like a little above their waist height. And I think what that does is it subconsciously resonates with kids because they see the world from that perspective.
Was Lucas using the camera to resonate with children? Or was he just positioning the camera low to make the characters look more heroic? Or even more, was his camera placement an emulation of the cinematography of Asian filmmakers he admired, such as Kurosawa or Ozu? These are all legitimate possibilities, and it's from ambiguities such as this that great film criticism often arises. However, if we are to embrace this ambiguity when looking at the works of filmmakers such as Kurosawa or Hitchcock, why not Lucas? To answer this, I decided to hit the road